everybody. Thank you for coming. As part of our attempt to make sure that absolutely everybody has an opportunity to give feedback on the academic structure before it's sent to the President's office to be approved by the Board of Trustees and the President, we put together these last two open forums. We had one yesterday at the North Central campus, and this will be the last of our opportunities today. We just have a few slides. You can see that the new structure will have 6 colleges and 16 departments and 3 schools, as compared to the combined campuses that have 11 colleges, 29 departments, and 1 school. This next slide is indicative of what the structure looks like on each of the campuses at present. And then our final slide is the proposed structure. As a reminder to everyone, the 2 faculty senates worked on some concepts for what the structures might look like. That information was brought to the joint senior leadership team. We reviewed it just briefly and then asked the deans if they might take a look at the structures that were put together by Faculty Senate. The deans made some suggestions, and the senior leadership team looked at that again. The final step was then to have meetings throughout the summer of each of the colleges for those individuals that were willing to come and participate in that activity. Finally, each of the colleges met once the contract period began to try to get as much full exposure on the part of faculty to be able to participate in what the structure looks like. There were just a couple of pieces that were not in place until about the last week or two. World Languages was attempting to find a home that they were happy with and that the people would be happy with them. And they fortunately found a nice home in political science and economics. And philosophy was looking for a home, and philosophy will be joining history. So that should be on the chart. As you are probably aware, the only part of the structure that has to be approved by the Board of Trustees is the academic structure. All the other structures were done administratively and between both campuses. They also, the Board of Trustees, need to approve the college names and the departmental names. So what you see on here will be the structure that's approved, the department names, the school names, and the department names. So with that, Karen, our provost, and Chancellor Dworkin are here with me to answer any questions you have.
A question, and I hope this is a relatively easy one. As a alum of Purdue Cal and an accounting graduate, I was just wondering where my where the accounting department fits in the College of Business, in what department. Obviously not the hospitality management, but I didn't know where that would fit in.
It'll be with the quantitative business studies department. Business worked hard to try to consolidate to just 2 departments and then the white school. So that's why it's a little bit different structure. It was really a lot of discussion, collaboration to have a more streamlined kind of structure.
But that separate degree still will exist.
Yes.
So.
Sure.
Dave Kozel, Electrical Computer Engineering. I have a few questions, but the first one is there a reason economics is not in the College of Business?
Well, I think that the economists that we have on this campus are generally economists that are more interested in the historical and political end of economics and not the quantitative end. The economists from the North Central campus are really financial economists. So they teach finance and statistics and quantitative analysis. So that split was in part made that way. Something that you should know is that less than 20% of economics departments are in business colleges. 80 to 90% are in liberal arts generally.
The other two questions or comments. One is, since the unification is kind of a major thing going on here, I would suggest that 2 years after the unification, we come back and look at the structure and reevaluate to say, is this working or is it not working?
That is a very good point, Dave. I think this is a fluid and flexible type of thing, and I think it may not even be 2 years. I mean, there may be, if something comes up that's not working, and if you wanted to change like a department name or you wanted to move something around, it may or may not have to go to the Board of Trustees. If it's something like a department name, probably yes. But I'm not really sure if you wanted to move like one area, like you were talking about economics from one college to another, probably that doesn't even require Board of Trustees approval. Yeah. And so, yes, good point.
Yeah. And we have talked with Provost Dutta about that very thing, and he agrees that we will evaluate this, and we may well be coming back maybe in a year, maybe 2 years, 3 years, because we'll learn. And then we also have set it up so that there's a fair amount of flexibility in many cases here. So if we find that something works better in another place, we can do that, as long as it doesn't require a change of college or title of department.
And if I could just going back a bit to the first question. So I'm sort of a labor economist myself, and my entire career before I came to PNC was in the Krannert School. And that's where one of the 20% where econ is in with management. But I think when you find econ in with management, it's where the school is very quantitative. And so everybody, as we were talking about earlier, everybody in the management school is quantitative, whether it's in marketing or whatever. And so that's sort of where it fits. But I think that's the reason.
And my third question, or final question, is right now, I guess they're either assistants or associate provost for each campus we have right now or each location. To me, that just seems counterintuitive, since we have one college, one department, one dean on each, overall. Having an assistant for the provost on each campus just seems like that takes away the ability for them to understand the big picture, or for them not to be thinking in terms of this campus or this location or that. And I just wondered if that's a temporary thing, or is there just going to be one assistant later on that helps out over both locations?
We'll have to see how that develops over time. We've had an associate vice chancellor for academic affairs at Purdue North Central for a long time. At Purdue Calumet, we've had the assistant vice chancellor for academic affairs, Beth Pelliciotti, that position for a long time. And when Beth retired, we looked at that position and kind of reconfigured it. So different people are doing different pieces of what Beth had done. And so we have new titles and kind of new configuration. So we've got Becky Stankowski, who's really doing a lot. She's taken over Danafu's position, basically, and a big piece of what Beth had done previously. And then Bill Law has also taken over part of what Beth has done previously. So it's a kind of just a different configuration, both interims, because we want to see how things work out. But we may or may not want to have an associate vice chancellor on each campus, because we do need to have somebody there if things emerge today. Who's going to handle, because these things do happen on occasion where something needs to be addressed right now or today. But as you point out, on the other hand, we may be better served by somebody who works on both campuses and has that understanding of both campuses. I can tell you that right now we're all working very collaboratively as a team and trying to really understand each campus. So the people in academic affairs were working very collaboratively, and the deans have been working very, very collaboratively across both campuses.
Dave, I think that with time, you know, some real thought needs to be put into the functions that are in the provost's office, and you know, how many people are needed to head up those functional areas. Now, it may be that physically we would want to have one person on one campus and one on the other, but they may have very different functions for the university as a whole. So one of the things that I've been saying for 4 years is that we need someone who's an expert in institutional research and assessment, which we really don't have. So we might need to have somebody with that level of expertise. And then we may need another person that's more on the human resource management side of academic affairs as a second associate provost. In which case, you know, it may make sense to physically put them on each campus because, as Karen said, you know, we always want to make sure there's one person with stability at that level on both campuses.
I understand that. I just think that whether something comes up or not, with all the electronic capability we have nowadays, no matter where you're at, you can answer questions or you can address issues. And if they do have different responsibilities, which makes sense, they should, then they should be very familiar with both campuses where, like everybody else, going back and forth one day a week or something, they should be, you know, intimately familiar with both campuses.
Yeah, my prediction is that is exactly what will happen. I see the athletic directors here, so to give a sort of a baseball example, instead of having somebody that just can play one position, they should be able to play multiple positions. So I'm almost sure that'll happen.
Yes.
I think that's not questions.
Other questions?
Do you have any sense of what the board is looking, what are the criteria that they're going to use to determine whether they approve this structure or not? Do you have any sense of that? I mean, they're just approving names, I guess, but what are they looking for?
Well, you know, I think that the board and the president and the provost at West Lafayette are looking toward us to give them a solution, you know, that we think is efficient and optimum. You know, the board members themselves did not sit in a back room thinking about what this should look like. But they do know that, you know, all of the faculty on campus have strong opinions about how they should be organized. And so I think they will just simply be looking at, you know, did we reduce the number of colleges? Did we reduce the number of departments? And did we do it in a way that is efficient and effective? And I would say, looking at this new proposed structure, everybody really worked hard at being efficient. So that's what I think that.
And I think also they're looking for greater collaboration between faculty, because when you put the faculty together from the two campuses, we will have a greater critical mass of faculty. So we'll be able to do additional things that we just weren't able to do previously when you have more faculty to work with. So I think that that's part of what they're looking at too. How do we strengthen both campuses through bringing the faculty together?
And when I look at this particular model on the front page that was part of the handout, it would appear to me that we've consolidated a lot of departments and probably there are considerably less administrative costs. How many administrators did we have originally and how many do we have now?
Just what it says there.
I can't see that, so
okay,
maybe
we
that's
don't
the
have
problem.
that. Okay,
So, and that's an accurate count right now?
I believe so, should be.
Where do you see the number? No, I'm talking about actual people that are actually getting paid administration.
Yeah, we have that number.
Because I think the board might ask a question
Yeah.
like that also.
You're probably right,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, they will.
Yeah,
They will.
They
They'll
will.
also want, and we're working on this right now, an estimated savings. But they know that the estimated savings from academic affairs is not going to be very much. You know, there's some administrative stipends, and then there'll be some conversions of people that go back to the classroom. You know, our estimate at this point is, you know, probably at the 200,000 level. It's not a lot of money. You know, the big savings comes in upper level administration, and then some on the operations side.
Follow up on this. How many new associate deans, associate department heads would there be after the merger?
That one, we'll see how that develops over time. At this point, we are looking for very few. We might need to add a couple of associate deans, but we're not looking at adding a lot of associate deans. We are looking at a lot of faculty coordinators and faculty program leadership. So we'll have more opportunities for faculty to take on some of those leadership roles in the department.
Would that be with release time or without release?
It would generally almost always be with release time, yes.
Way over here.
After all that, this is going to be very disappointing. I have an observation rather than a question. Something that would increase my comfort level is to make a note about the grad school on the diagram, because even though the grad school is subsumed within some of the academic units, we do still exist, and we have administrative authority on the campus, even though we're not autonomous. And it would just, for me, make the picture more complete if we have a notation that the grad school will remain
Under
as it
academic
is,
affairs.
yeah. Or,
We
you know, that it still
probably should make
exists.
a list of everything that belongs under academic affairs that's not actually part of this structure. I think that's a good suggestion. Because, for example, advising, you know, and student success, all of that comes under academic affairs. Institutional research comes under academic affairs. There's a lot that is not on this that falls under the provost. But this is the part that has to be approved.
They don't need to approve any of the rest of it. So we tried to focus in on what does the Board of Trustees really need to approve. So I do want to go back with the question on associate deans too, just to not be, you know, have any confusion. We may find out over time that we do need to add a little bit more in that level. Just as Chancellor Keon was saying, we're going to need to look at what kind of administration do we really need to be functional in academic affairs. So, but we will see over time, and of course the commitment is to try to keep that as lean as we can.
I guess this goes back with revisiting it, but if we do find out that we need a number of more associate deans, putting up the final one that we had there for showing liberal arts and sciences was very large, and engineering, for example, is a separate, has its own director and things like that. If we're having all these other associate deans, the reason people voted for less colleges was because they wanted to spend less money. Right. And if we're having all these associate deans, it might make more sense to just have more colleges.
And so that's one of the things we do have to be very careful on. And typically, an associate dean, keep in mind, is not a full-time position. West Lafayette has a lot of associate deans. They're often half-time.
Yeah, I think too, you know, there are some areas where accreditation plays a much larger role in a college than in another college. So in those colleges or schools that deal with accreditation, you know, it's possible to have a part-time administrator that just works on accreditation issues, which is often the case, you know that.
We haven't had that luxury.
But somebody gets release time to do it. That's fair? Yeah. So instead of release time, they're an associate dean. You know, it's,
Yes, you better get the microphone, Mo, because they're recording all this.
Thank you. My question has to do with advising.
Advising.
We are doing the scheduling now for the spring 2016. In a couple of weeks, we will be doing the schedule for the fall of 2016. How are we going to organize advising, and at what point in the process we are going to identify, you know, where the advisors are going to go and what their responsibilities are?
That's a
And
great
also,
question.
if we are going to change systems because we're going to merge Banner and we are going to merge all the, you know, the background systems that we use, when can we expect to have those systems available for the advisors?
Very good question. I'll start with the advising question. And we are unifying advising. Currently, academic advising is in enrollment management and student affairs at PNC. So it's a big change for Purdue North Central. And advising is going to come under academic affairs. And we've started that discussion. We had a committee last year that worked on how might this work. So we're looking now at how do we implement some of the recommendations of this committee. The plan tentatively is to have the actual unification take place in January, because that is the least busy time for the advisors. So that's a very important component of this. We don't want to disrupt things during a busy time for advising. That would be a bad idea. So that's why it's maybe a little bit of an unusual time to do it in January. But we're working very closely with the advisors to make sure that this works for them. You will be seeing more coming out on that over the next several months in terms of what are the steps that we'll be taking. You know, the advisors are getting to know each other. I think it's been a good process so far. It is a big adjustment, though, for especially the advisors from North Central. We will be also taking advantage of the EAB software, which has worked very well for Purdue Calumet. So to me, that's one of the exciting opportunities here, that we'll be able to make that available on both campuses. And so I'm not sure when we'll have access to that software for the North Central campus, but we will start doing the training spring semester so that the advisors at North Central are well prepared to make use of that software. And I think we'll be learning a lot at North Central from the positive experience at Purdue Calumet. Now, as far as Banner, this is a huge, huge project. One thing we've found out is that we have to look at so many what's called business processes. It's just basically how you put things into the computer. And it turns out if there are two different ways to do it on the two different campuses in Banner, we've done it the two different ways. So we have to look at hundreds, maybe, I don't know, many hundreds of pieces of this puzzle to bring together the two Banner systems. And there have been different versions of Banner, too, of course, to make life more complicated. And Sarah's here. She can tell you how hard people are working on this. The plan is to have this all done by March. So they have been working very, very hard. And people in the different offices, like financial aid and registrar, they've been working like crazy all summer. So it's not just faculty that have been working hard over the summer, it's also all the people who make all these different offices work. So you'll be hearing a lot more about Banner, I'm sure, in the next several months, too, in terms of where we're at. And we do need to have it done by March. I don't know if Sarah wants to add anything?
I don't have anything to add, but yes, we will have things done by March, and the technological pieces we're working on now. I don't have anything to add.
You know, one of the things I would add, particularly as it relates to the specific of your question, and that is, you know, degree works will be developed while we're developing everything else. It'll be done simultaneously. It won't wait. For those degree programs that have no changes, they will automatically just move into DegreeWorks for the new system. And then for those programs that get approved with changes that will be kind of new programs, those will be loaded into DegreeWorks once they're approved. You know, we're encouraging the project managers to do as much as they can as soon as the information is available. So I was told, for example, this morning that communications is probably going to be one of the first areas that's been worked on. You know, as soon as that's approved, then we can get people starting to put that new program into DegreeWorks. But existing programs really won't have any changes if there's not a match on both campuses. So, is that helpful?
Yes, it's very helpful. Good question.
Sure.
The other question is a question from one of my students. He came to my office yesterday and he asked me, I graduate in May 2017. What is my degree? Where am I going to graduate from?
Good question.
Yeah.
He had no idea. He was very confused and very concerned.
No change.
Yeah, no change. I mean, basically, the diploma says Purdue University on it, granted in Westville or granted in Hammond, and really no change whatsoever on that.
The diploma's always been that way.
It's always been there. In fact, that was one of the first things I looked at, because I was looking at the diplomas, because people ask me that same question, is my diploma going to change? And so I always tell students, you're going to have a Purdue University degree, and you get your degree awarded in the same way it has been in the past. I'm sure we'll have graduations on both campuses like we've had in the past, and it'll say awarded in Westville or awarded in Hammond.
Or West Lafayette.
Or West Lafayette.
Or for those at
Fort Wayne.
IUPUI,
Fort
say
Wayne.
Indianapolis, or Fort Wayne for those at IPFW. And that's been the way since it started, for 70 years, I would imagine here. So no change there. Now the transcripts will just say, that will not distinguish between campus. So we'll have one transcript.
It'll say Purdue
Purdue
Northwest,
Northwest.
on the transcript,
Correct.
Purdue Northwest, yep.
I have two questions. You mentioned something about unification happening in January.
Oh, just for the advising.
Okay.
Just for
Only
advising,
advising. I'm glad you asked. No, nothing else. And the reason for that, it's a little bit unusual in some ways, but again, it's because we're trying to be very sensitive to the advisors and the importance of the advisors, and trying to do it at a time when they're not really busy.
The other question I have is regard to the the psychology degrees on the two campuses. There's a BA at North Central and a BS here at Purdue Calumet. I've heard that those could remain separate or they had to be the same. And I'm just wondering which one it is.
Okay, it's a good question. For those that, these are two different degrees, BA and BS. So if the department really wishes to continue with those two separate degree programs, that really is a faculty decision. And that may make sense, or it may be that over time you want to bring those two together. I would think that there would be some real benefits to bringing them together, at least quite a bit. But since they are two different, BA and a BS, that if the faculty wish to keep them separate.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to both of your questions. The latter question, the department can choose to do whatever they want. If I were asked, I would recommend that they have a BS degree laid out in DegreeWorks and a BA laid out in DegreeWorks, and if possible, offer both of them on both campuses.
Yep.
In terms of your first question, the whole organization piece can roll out probably anytime after the Board of Trustees approves this. So, the question is, how quickly do people want to start organizing themselves? So if you take psychology, for example, that's one of the unique new pieces in the structure. And so it may be that, the faculty in psychology will want to start working together as a group. And at some point in time, a dean will be chosen, and then after the dean is chosen, then a department head will be chosen. So, that could come as early as February, March, or it could be as late as April, May, but hopefully it would all be in place by July 1st. I would think the way things are moving that, you know, by March, April of next year, probably almost everything will be in place.
Yeah. I think I like Chancellor Keehan's answer on the 2 psychology degrees, and then the market can work itself out, and we'll see in the future what happens. If both degrees are heavily populated, keep them both. If one's got 500 students and one's got 2, that tells you something also. The other thing I wanted to say about that is psychology sort of is like economics. It bounces around a bit. When I first started at Purdue in West Lafayette, the Department of Psychology was in the School of Science, Psychological Sciences, and they're not there anymore. I mean, so things like that have changed over time. That sort of goes back to your original question, how things might change over time when people, when faculty members want to think about doing something a little differently.
You know, it occurs to me that as we go from a model where we started off with basically, it looks like 9 colleges down to what is now going to be 6, that there's going to be less administrators needed. We have like 2 department heads in education. I think we have 2 business deans. How are those decisions going to be made? And I know that there are some people say they're going to be appointed, some are just going to be appointed as interim, some are going to do national searches. I guess my concern is what kind of faculty input is going to need to occur for those decisions to be made. And speaking for some of the faculty that expressed a lot of concerns about how the reorganization was done at the dean's level over the summer, and some of the concerns that were raised about that, I think it's really important that the faculty have to be at least talked about what the process should be for making those final decisions. I don't think it'll be acceptable that somebody just appoints.
No, I don't.
Because I think there'll be pushback on that.
I don't think that would be a good idea.
Okay, that's just the point I wanted to make.
You know,
Yeah.
we've discussed this at the joint senior leadership level, and we'll have to look college by college and department by department about whether we can do an internal search or an external search. But whatever decision is made, there will be absolutely full faculty input on all of those decisions.
Good point, and I agree totally.
Yeah, we just have to do that. And in terms of this, what happened this summer, the deans tried to provide opportunities for faculty to get together. But I think we do need to keep in mind that there were a lot of faculty meetings. By our most recent tally, just about 40 major meetings this summer, workshops, retreats, things like that. So and then there were a lot of other smaller, more specific kinds of meetings. So there was a lot of faculty involvement, I would say. And I think that speaks very highly of the faculty, that they were willing to give up a lot of their time this summer to work on these issues.
Gideon.
I apologize, I came late. But you mentioned, I heard you mentioning the Chancellor Keehan, that there would be saving of about $200,000 in academic affairs. And I was wondering, in administrative positions, we mentioned 41 to about 27 from your responses. Have you an estimate of the saving in administrative positions?
Well, in administrative positions outside of academic affairs, yes. Now, one thing to keep in mind with academic affairs is that as we go from, say, fewer, to fewer heads, that unless people decide to retire or leave, the faculty who are in those positions, who do not continue to serve as heads, they'll still be faculty here. So that will be wonderful in many ways because we'll have a lot of experienced senior faculty who will go back to teaching full-time or perhaps some other kinds of responsibilities. But they'll be available to do mentoring for new faculty, all the things that you really need senior faculty to do. So, but they will still be here. And I think that's really beneficial to us to have those senior faculty. But we do need to keep that in mind. But in the other areas, of the university. We do have an estimate for
Yeah.
the savings right now.
Let me
Yes.
pick up on that. It's a good question. I think well, we can tell specifically, Vice Chancellor Turner has that data, but I would say that to date, on the administrative side, around $600,000 plus in savings that are recurring. And then you're looking at a big recurring savings right now. It may not look that big, but once my time is up, then we'll have only one chancellor, and so you'll have an additional amount of savings there. And I think it's hard to predict exactly where the total number of administrative savings will come up if we're 5 years out, but I'm thinking it's going to be north of $2 million.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to make a point, an observation about the shifting of the resources on the org chart. I think if you think of the org chart as a triangle, and we've got two campuses and we're merging them, the triangle necessarily gets larger at the bottom. We've got more students because we're combining. We've got more faculty. And so it's only logical that resources would be shifted, the savings at the top, some of that would be shifted to the bottom.
Yeah.
So when I think about cost savings, right, I think about it more in terms of one provost instead of two and things like that. But if you've got more faculty and more students, we may need more coordinators and department heads, and even in the dean's office, we may need an associate dean there, and that isn't bad for the faculty and the students. That's good because that's maybe more attention being given to grant writing or creating opportunities for services and resources and things like that. So I think of necessity we need to shift some resources down, and I also think that that's one of the advantages of the unification is that it allows us to shift more resources down. And one of the examples of that, I think, is we've now separated out psychology as a separate department, which is probably something that we should have done a long time ago, but this became an opportunity to do that, and we took advantage of it. So just a different perspective on that.
I think
Thanks.
that's very well said. I should have written that down.
It is written down, Karen.
Well, okay, you're right. It is written down. Very well said. And I think we do need to keep that in mind. This does make additional resources available to put them closer to the students. So to provide additional opportunities for faculty and to have the resources, again, closest to the students. And that's all for the good.
I know this question is not about unification, but since you brought up DegreeWorks is now available just for undergraduate students. Is there a move to bring graduate students? I'm sure Joy would like this question.
Go ahead, please.
This is something we found out yesterday at North Central, that a number of the questions had to be answered by people that were here. In part, we were asked some questions about why different structures emerged, and none of us were there when they emerged. So we appreciate Tom.
The graduate school uses the electronic plan of study system, which is a homegrown, Purdue-developed system, and it allows for 4 to 5 to 6 levels of approval. So the student approves it by submitting it. The committee of 3 approves it. The grad chair approves it. Then there are 2 levels of approval at the graduate school. The graduate school at West Lafayette looked into replacing their home-developed system 2 to 3 years ago, and they did look at DegreeWorks, but one of the things that the program did not allow for was this multiple level of approvals. And so they decided not to look at that. As I understand it, they did talk to the DegreeWorks folks and ask if this is a feature that could be developed for this program, and I think they're not the only graduate school that's interested in looking at this, but until the program allows for multiple levels of review and approval, then the DegreeWorks system wouldn't work for graduate students.
When I used to work at Indiana State University, and we had some of the similar questions, and at least at that time when I was there, we had used a different kind of degree audit program. It wasn't DegreeWorks, but it was a similar idea. And at that time, at least, when faculty looked closely at this topic, they had a similar situation. And also, so many graduate programs are very specific to individual students. But I think it is possible For more heavily structured programs, perhaps the MBA, for example, could maybe move to something like that down the road.
Hi, my question is, do you have at the North Central campus a Center for Learning and Academic Success, and is the structure the same as it is on this campus?
No, not at all.
And do preparatory students go directly into the college, or are they in something like a Center for Learning and Academic Success?
That's a very good question, and that's one reason we're taking time to bring advising together, because there is nothing like the Center for Learning and Academic Success at North Central. So some students go into a status where they need more intensive advising, and so they are advised at, there's a general advising center. And then most students, however, go right into the major or a pre-major. So that's how things are structured there. Students go into pre's, as it's called. So obviously we need to have a similar structure on both campuses for advising. So that is a big... It's going to go more toward the Center for Learning and Academic Success. So that kind of a structure. We're also talking about something called meta majors, and you'll probably be hearing more about that. You're familiar with meta majors, yes. For those of you who aren't, this is something that has been used well at other campuses. So it's kind of a general pathway for students who are not directly admissible. And in some cases, you know, for some programs and colleges, this is not going to be a big issue, because it's not a big deal in terms of who's directly admissible. But in some instances, say nursing or engineering, I think the meta majors may be very helpful to help those students to either get prepared to see if they can enter those majors, or find a good alternative that may be in a similar area. So that should help us with having more targeted advising for students who are not directly admissible.
I like the meta majors approach, and I also like, you know, this is another example of where, you know, you have best practices. The two campuses have done things quite differently in some areas, and in some cases, you know, the best practice might be at the Purdue Calumet campus. Other cases, it might be at the Purdue North Central campus, and I think this is going to work out pretty well. We've the other thing, you know, the earlier question about advising, we've done things so differently, but that's another example where it probably is better to have advising in on the academic side. I've probably revisited that question in my 15 years, probably 15 times. I get asked about that all the time. And there really is not one way that's definitely better than the other. You can make good arguments either way, but once you become a combined campus, like we're going to be a combined university, you have to do it the best way. And so the best way, I think, of the two we have right now is what is done at the Purdue Calumet campus.
This was one of the 1,000 questions that needed to be resolved. And we just resolved this in the past week or two. But knowing that we were going to start admitting students next month, we had to have a decision of what was going to happen to a student that applied to a specific degree program but could not be admitted. Where are we going to put them? And so the meta major really was accepted broadly by everyone as the best practice, with a class kind of for those that don't fit into a meta major.
It's interesting how these dates, as certain dates come, you sort of get to the point you have to make a decision on something. He just gave a good example, but I'm thinking back to athletics again. I remember about a year ago we're thinking, well, you know, we're going to be recruiting students that are athletes, and what are we going to be telling them? Are they going to be able to finish their career on this camp? You know, so that's how we got into the whole discussion. We had to get the athletics thing cleared up, and so we did that. And so as you go through these different milestones, I mean, it's impossible to think of everything in advance and have a clear plan on everything. So certain, you know, that's why all these meetings are pretty good. We have these discussions, and we say this guy has to get done, and that's just another example of how this works.
So the meta majors will be in place.
There is a meeting happening today in Indianapolis, a statewide meeting on meta majors.
The Commission for Higher Education is very interested in meta majors. That's a good thing.
So we have several representatives from each campus who are at that meeting. They'll bring back the latest from the state. Now, what we implement is probably not going to be exactly what the state is talking about, but it's going to be pretty similar. And there's some value in that, to having kind of, for students and prospective students, to have some kind of statewide broad structure and understanding of this. So, but we do need to start implementing the meta majors fairly soon for admissions purposes.
So I think, Karen, so in the future, you could have directed mid into a program, meta major, there's a fourth one would be deny, and then there a third category too?
Yeah, class.
Class, okay. Class, okay.
Ones who don't fit into any of those meta majors. So, but in terms of what exactly does that mean, how do we advise students, we'll be taking our time to get all that figured out. We don't have to have everything in place for quite a while yet, for several months. But we do need to have that, what do we put in the admissions letter? We need to have that.
Yeah, so we need to have a kind of a structure that we believe we're moving towards so that we can put in letters for each piece of that structure. So although it may not formally be finished, it's really going to be close to finished in a month. We have to, or else we can't write letters to people, or else we'll write a letter to somebody and then later tell them it's changed, and we don't want to do that.
Nope, you don't want to do that.
So we're trying to minimize confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, it'll be done way before November.
My question has to do with tenure and promotion. We have faculty members who arrived to either, the Westville campus or the Hammond campus 3 years ago, okay? So they were hired under the assumption and with certain rules in each campus. By the time that they access tenure, when they are eligible to, go for tenure and promotion, they will be in a different department.
That's true.
They will be in a different university than the one where they enter. Do you have any advice for the department to give to these, assistant professors?
That is a very important question. And there are several pieces to this. One piece is that the Purdue system recently finished revision of promotion and tenure system-wide policies. And as part of that, Peggy Gerard and I were involved in drafting some language for the Purdue system policy that's in there. And others were involved with that too. That says basically that when promotion and tenure changes, which it does over time, promotion and tenure processes and standards change at universities from time to time, but that when that occurs, that the previous criteria must be taken into consideration, especially for those who are nearing the end of their period for promotion and tenure. So that's right in the new promotion and tenure policy, and I'd be happy to send copies to you or anybody who wants that. I think another piece of this is we're going to need to have a joint task force working on promotion and tenure for the future, and that will need to start, I think, fairly soon. And as part of that, I've written, got a few kind of notes in terms of some of the topics that we need to be sure to include, and one of them is this very issue. So how do departments work with faculty when these things change? And how do we best communicate? Because we're going to have to communicate and communicate and communicate with the individual faculty, with those who are chairing the different committees, with department heads, so that everybody has as much clarity as possible in a situation like this.
I could take a crack at that too. So a couple points. This will be the last year. There'll be separate promotion and tenure on each of the campuses, just like this is the last year we have separate athletic teams. Second point, I've been through this before. And I was asked the exact same question. When I first came to Purdue North Central, we had sections. We didn't even have colleges. So we moved from sections, which were sort of like departments, to colleges. And I had people say, well, I was in the section of history, and now I'm going to be in a college. How's that going to affect my promotion and tenure? What kind of advice would you give? And so sort of been through that. And I think the things to keep in mind are that just continue to work hard, do your job, and things won't change that much. And I also got a lot of questions. Well, you have so many full professors of biology. People in the liberal arts can't get a fair shake on the university, on the higher level committee. And again, I said, do you believe that a full professor of biology can't fairly evaluate somebody in English? And it's actually worked out pretty well. And I find that one of the nice things, since I've been at Purdue all these years, at these higher level committees, you see people take it very seriously. And obviously somebody in biology knows their field better. But if there's a person in English who says this person's ready, they're usually willing to take that into account and vote yes. I've seen very few people pick on people across areas like that. So I think it'll, if you're a good person, you're going to got promoted under the old system, you'll be promoted under the new system. But it is true that we have to have a new process that Karen's been working on when the campuses come together.
I mean, the only thing I would add is that, you know, there should always be multiple opportunities throughout the year for colleagues and heads to get untenured people together to talk about promotion and tenure. And that should be everywhere all the time. It is very common, I think, at many institutions early in the fall for heads and colleagues to get together with untenured people and kind of review what happened the year before for people going through the promotion and tenure process. You know, then come January, department heads should be doing annual evaluations, and part of that evaluation should be something about the progress toward tenure. You know, how did you do this year, but how have you done over the last 4 years? And then again, as we come near to the end of the year, you know, again, that constant review. If you're thinking about going up this year or, well, say next year or sometime in the near future, you know, what are the kinds of things you need in your packet? What are the things people are looking for? You know, so you would expect, I hope, that untenured people are getting a lot of touch by their colleagues and their department head in terms of understanding what is needed and how do I execute the process.
You talked quite like the last question. We talked a lot about what changes we are expecting to happen as a result of the unification. Who is going to monitor and look for unexpected changes due to this organizational change? What systems are you planning to implement for the unexpected things that you did not think that would happen?
So the question is about unanticipated consequences. I don't know that we have any system in place, but I know that probably some things like that will occur.
Yeah, so, you know, under AQUIP that the Calumet campus has had, you know, we've always had a whole system of committees looking at a lot of aspects of the university. And recently, Karen, working with some of the steering committee that existed under AQUIP, is going to be revised as a more continuous improvement structure. So there'll be a continuous improvement steering committee, you know, and then there'll be subcommittees on each of the criteria. And one of the things that all of those committees will be doing is looking for exceptions. Mm-hmm. You know, so not only will they be thinking about where can we go and what can we do and what opportunities are there, but there's also this constant monitoring of exceptions. So anytime you have continuous improvement, you have that built in.
Yeah. And these will be joint committees across both campuses. So I think that will be, you know, that will be part of their job, exactly what you said.
I wanted to get back to the promotion and tenure issue. I served for the past 3 years on an ad hoc committee that was created by Faculty Affairs to develop a document that we thought was pretty comprehensive, and it was actually vetted with the Board of Trustees. And as far as I know, that's where that document sits right now. What is this task force going to do? I'm a little confused about that only because we already have a sitting ad hoc committee that's looked at promotion and tenure. Mm-hmm. And certainly I would agree that there probably need to be people from the other campus that are part of that process. Exactly. But I'm surprised that we're creating still another committee to look at that document. What would be the purpose of that?
Well, we'll have to have some kind of a group that represents both campuses, and I'm not sure what it will be. We'll need to determine that fairly soon. But there are a couple of things under the Purdue system policy that we do need to develop for Purdue Northwest. One is the criteria, and the other is committee structure. So we're going to have to work on that. And I'm also very concerned about exactly what we're talking about, the communication, making sure that everybody is aware of, how can we do this as best we can, fairness, all of that. So how do we build that in? But I know a little bit, and I'll be learning more about the group that's been working at Calumet. I think it's been primarily on the criteria. Is that correct? And so certainly that will be the starting place. But we'll just have to get both campuses together, take a look at that, take a look at the final policy that was approved in May, the policy and procedures, make sure that the criteria all fit, which I imagine they will, but we'll just have to take a look at that one more time. The criteria also for the West Lafayette campus still have not been approved by the Board of Trustees. And they're on the agenda right now being discussed in West Lafayette. So I'm not sure where those criteria will end up. And we're not going to have the same criteria as West Lafayette, but we may learn a little bit from what they're doing.
Yeah, so the criteria that you're talking about actually wasn't approved by the board. The IPFW, North Central, ours, and West Lafayette were together in a packet. They pulled out West Lafayette first, and the board had a large number of suggestions that they wanted incorporated that weren't there. And almost every one of them had something to do with student success.
Yep.
All different ways, but there was also an experiential piece that they wanted in as well, undergraduate research and so forth. The West Lafayette faculty made a revision, and the Board of Trustees wanted just a little bit more tweaking. In my estimation, I think they would have passed it and said tweak it, but the provost said no, I want it to be perfect before you pass it, so he brought it back again. And my expectation is that it'll be finished in October, knowing that, number one, we didn't incorporate any of those component parts that the board wanted, and number two, knowing that we shouldn't probably have two approved when we really are going to need one, is I think where we got to the point of saying it makes sense that as we're going through and putting in the component parts that the board want, it would be better if we just do one for Purdue Northwest.
That was an administratively appointed committee. Just a suggestion, wouldn't it have been important to do that through the faculty governance structure? That's.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it was done.
I don't either.
I'm sorry. It was something that was done by the provost, so I was not in that discussion at all. Okay. But I think all of us would agree that faculty senate, should be the ones that are working on it.
Absolutely.
Are you talking about this group that worked on the criteria?
Well,
that
it sounds
that
to me
you're
like
on?
this task force is going to continue the work of the group that we currently had.
I would,
If I'm understanding.
probably, yep.
And I guess my question was, why did we need to do that if we already had the Senate working on it? We could continue.
Yeah, probably. We just need to bring the two together.
Any other questions? I know it's almost been an hour and it's almost noontime, so people probably have reached their time limit and are probably ready for lunch. So
Thank you all for coming.
thank you very much.